How's it going, everybody? It's Pilot Flame, and we are back with another Game Week preview, Game Week 33 plus. Just testing out the stream deck there, and it seems to be working just fine, so I guess I can rely on it now. Definitely worth it, definitely worth it. Unfortunately, the stream's a bit laggy at the moment. Maybe that's just because of the animated screen. I'm not too sure, but I'll keep an eye on it, and hopefully it will fix itself. Can't do anything about the internet, really. If it's on the ropes, it's on the ropes, and I'll just kind of monitor it from now until then. So, without further ado, let's get into this Game Week preview. Alright, so we should be able to see my team up on the screen here. I'm just going to double check one more time, just to make sure things are okay. Yep, they are fantastic. There we go. Minimize that, keep that as is. Fantastic. Alright, so we end up with 63 points this week. Pretty good considering the score line. However, it wasn't obviously good enough to go up in rank, unfortunately. Kevin De Bruyne and Pierre-Emerick Aubameyang kind of did a number on us, which is not great. But nonetheless, we're kind of happy with the team. Salah hit the post. Had a couple extra chances as well. Could have potentially scored, and then after Liverpool kind of went down 2 goals, then it was kind of finished from there, really. But yeah, pretty happy overall with the team. Obviously, Trent getting 0 obviously doesn't help, but not much of an upgrade on the bench, really. What can you do? Like when it comes to those like big games between like Man United, Chelsea, Liverpool, City, Spurs, or even Arsenal, Leicester, when you have those big clashes against each other, it unfortunately kind of can go a bit south sometimes. It can also be very good as well. We can't like guarantee points. The reason I went with Salah captain this week was just because of just historical data. Like he had done really well in previous game weeks, so it made sense to kind of captain him, and yeah, that's kind of what I went with. Obviously, in hindsight, I would have gone with Fernandes, and he would have got me an extra 13 points, so we'd have been looking really good. We would have been on 76 if that was the case. So we'll kind of just have to take a look at it as it goes on. So let's just run through the team really quickly. So obviously, Wolves getting the clean sheet, getting their victory as well. Did quite well for themselves. Doherty and Patricio not in the bonus, but getting 6 points nonetheless. Exactly what we wanted. And Jimenez obviously blanking for the first time in 3 game weeks here. He obviously had 2 and 2 and just didn't happen to score in the 3rd game. Can't expect him to score every game. I mean, he is human after all. Then we had the Man United assets. What more can I say? Wan-Bissaka with an assist, clean sheet. Pogba getting on the score sheet as well, getting his assist to Bruno. Bruno scoring 2. Mason Greenwood, for those who had him, was really good as well. And those that went in with Martial and Rashford were left kind of empty-handed, which is a bit unfortunate because I think they deserved something. So yeah, I think it was fine overall. I think this game we could be very good for Rashford and Martial, specifically because of them playing Bournemouth, which is why we have the free hit active, which we'll get to later on. Moving on to our Liverpool assets, obviously Trent getting 0 and Salah captain obviously getting not too much. I still like them going forward. Klopp came out in this press conference saying that you just don't give away Premier League starts like Christmas presents. So clearly he's looking to say, okay, there might be 1 or 2 rotations every now and again, but we're going for those records basically, which is good to hear. I was kind of worried about Liverpool assets after that game. There was kind of maybe they were on their their binge drinking or whatever they were after they'd won the league and they were celebrating it. So it's good to see that Liverpool are going to be going strong from Klopp's point of view into the Aston Villa game, which is something that could be very good for Liverpool because they're going to be a little bit pissed off that they lost 4-0 to City, who they had won the title over, so they're probably going to abuse Aston Villa, who are in the relegation zone. And on to our Spurs asset and Son. He's got 2 assists and 2, and he's probably not going to be in my free hit team, unfortunately. It just seems a little bit expensive at his price point for just getting an assist. And yeah, you could make arguments for him that he looks the most dangerous potentially. Obviously, Kane scored again, and it's just something that it could be just kind of up in the air, I think. And I just don't see that Spurs are just going to be good assets going forward, personally, but that's just me. And then moving on to our Everton Assets. Richarlison didn't train yesterday, but apparently he's going to train today, according to Ancelotti. Or he didn't train today, but he's going to train tomorrow, something along those lines. He should be good for Monday, so don't be worried about him if you have him. I don't think I'm going to be keeping him in my free hit team. I have other plans there, but he still is in my original team, and he got us a goal. Unfortunately, obviously came off due to the injury before 60 minutes, so it didn't get us an extra point, but beggars can't be choosers, unfortunately. Then we have Calvert Lewin, 4 games, going back to game week 28 before I believe he recently scored last. Let's check the fixtures here. It was, yeah, game week 28 versus United, funnily enough. But Chelsea, nothing. Liverpool, nothing. You kind of expect nothing in those games. But Norwich, kind of expected something. Leicester, could have been something there. You know, 2 teams that on form aren't obviously that great overall. We then have obviously the bench. Obviously Martin doesn't play. Nketiah got it 1 point. Lascelles got 2 points. And Ngakie's contract is no longer. So, let's move on to the scores and see how we did on our predictions. Just gonna make a mental note of something here. Just give me 1 second. All right. Okie dokie. And we should be able to see that on the screen there. That's the predictions that we have. And yeah, let's take a look at how we did. So we got the Wolves versus Aston Villa one correct in terms of the result. Southampton and Watford was a draw, but Southampton ended up winning 3-1. We also have the likes of, let me actually just make sure that this is able to see. Yeah. Oh yeah, looks good. Just minimize that. Okay. So, Crystal Palace versus Burnley. We said it'd be 1-0 Crystal Palace, ended up being 1-0 Burnley. So we got both of those wrong there. So, little X mark. We said United win 3-1 against Brighton. They won 3-0. So that is a 1 point wonder there. We got Arsenal 3-0 over Norwich. They won 4-0, so 1 point there. Newcastle 1-0 over Bournemouth. They ended up destroying Bournemouth, scoring 4 in that game, but we did get the result right, so 1 point there. We got the Everton Leicester score exactly right, so fantastic. That was 3 points for that. Chelsea didn't beat West Ham. They lost 3-2 in the dying moments of the final stage of the game, so no points there. We said Spurs would beat Sheffield United because we thought Sheffield United were going to be bad. Turns out they seem to be on their way back up to good form, but mind you, Spurs, they're not playing well at all, are they? So yeah. Then we said Liverpool beat Man City 2-1. Well, we were definitely wrong there. So let's sum up our points here. So we got 1, 2, 3, 4, 7 points total. Not as good as what we had last week. We had 4 more points in 11, but we did get, like I said, I like to get 1 to 2, like, you know, at least right per week, you know, for sure. But yeah, not too bad. Arsenal clean sheet, got that one right. Dubravka would have been good, but unfortunately they conceded at the last moment, so not great there. Chelsea was obviously awful. Pogba came in through clutch for us, and Nketiah wasn't very good. So 2 out of 5 on our differential slash kind of key picks. This was a bit more of a riskier week. I have a kind of a balanced one this week where I have a couple that are kind of risky and a couple that are just going to be good, I think. So yeah, that's it for the score predictions there. Moving on to this game week fixtures. We have most of the games on Saturday and Sunday, and then we obviously have the Spurs-Everton game on Monday. Let's bring over our notepad here. I'm just going to put it in the center, or center-ish. Should be able to see it there. Just going to double check that. Oh yeah, plenty of space there. Lovely dovely. There we go. Alright, so Norwich versus Brighton, I think this should be a bounce back for Brighton. I don't see Norwich scoring in this game. Norwich just kind of they're going to get relegated, unfortunately for them. I don't see any way where they don't. I don't see them picking up points, period. They just concede too many goals. And I think Brighton should win this game comfortably. I think a 2-0 scoreline is fair for them. And they'll be looking back to bounce back from the Man United loss. Leicester versus Crystal Palace. This one is actually a tough one to call. Yes, Leicester is at home, but Leicester seem to find it difficult to score in recent games. They were all over Everton for the vast majority of the game after Everton scored 2 and kind of sat back and said, what can you do? And Leicester was only able to come away with 1 goal, which was kind of a scrappy one in the end, but they didn't really carve Everton open. So, and I think Crystal Palace is going to be well organized, they're going to be compact, and they're going to be very good on the counter, and they can probably surprise Leicester. I think this could easily be a scoring draw. I think 2-2 might be good. Actually, yeah, 2-2 probably sounds fine. I think what will happen is potentially Crystal Palace might score early on. Leicester might have to open up. They get one and they maybe trade back and forth, and it could end up being a decently scoring draw. Could be interesting to see. A bit counterintuitive with Crystal Palace because they have a very solid defense. But I think that both teams are going to have to try to open up to maybe get something out of the game, and I think it's just going to end in a draw. 2-2 is probably my favored result, but I think 1-1 is also a good shot as well. Now, Man United versus Bournemouth. I think United should win this game comfortably. United seem to be winning 3-0, so I'm just going to predict them to win 3-0. Newcastle did win 4-1 over Bournemouth, and I think United could win by a much larger scoreline. However, I'm just going to go with a 3-0 win because that's what they've done in their past 2 games, and they're up against weaker opposition at home. And I can definitely see Marcus Rashford getting on the score sheet here. He's probably desperate to get a goal, and if he's taken the video footage from St. Maximin and what he did to Bournemouth, he should have no problems getting on the score sheet in this game week for sure. So let's check out Wolves and Arsenal. Now this one's kind of tough to call. Obviously Arsenal only scored 1 before the game versus Norwich, which they scored 4. 3 of those goals were kind of fortunate. 1 was near post, 2 were defensive errors. Both scored by Aubameyang, which kind of hurt us. For the defensive error side of things. Wolves have been very tight at the back. I think Arsenal will probably score in this game, which is why I'm free hitting out my Wolves players. And I wouldn't put it past Wolves to score 1. I'm not sure if they will score 2. I know Arsenal's defense is bad. I think Wolves will win this game 2-1. I think it's going to be a bit tough. It could be a bit cagey. I would not be surprised at all with a draw, some type of scoring draw. But I'm going to edge just Wolves just based on form and how good their defense has been, even though I predicted them to concede 1 in this game. I just think somehow Arsenal will find a way to get 1 goal. Maybe Wolves go ahead 1, they get 1 later on in the second half, and then Arsenal kind of nick 1 and kind of make the scoreline look okay. Now, Chelsea versus Watford. Boy, I do not have confidence in Chelsea's defense. With the likes of Sarr, with the likes of Troy Deeney, who can just basically bully the defense and just run the game. I'm not too sure about this one. Watford have been inconsistent, but so have Chelsea. You go and beat City if you're Chelsea, and then you go and lose to West Ham. It's just, and West Ham's done the double over them as well. It's just a bit of a ropey situation here. I still think I'm going to predict Chelsea to end up grafting out a win in that one. I think 2-1 is probably a good scoreline to go for. And yeah, I think that could be possible. It could be 2-1 the other way as well. I don't think it's going to be a draw in this game. I think somebody will get the result in it, whether it's Chelsea dropping more points or whether it's them kind of regaining the balance that they had after the West Ham defeat. Burnley versus Sheffield United. Now I'm kind of torn on this one because Burnley have looked very solid defensively after their mauling that they received by Man City. Sheffield United have kind of looked on the up and up. They scored 3 past Spurs, whose defense isn't great. Obviously, Burnley's is a bit more resilient than that. I think I can see Sheffield United winning this one. Honestly, I think they'll come. They're on the up and up. And they might show a good representation of themselves. I think they'll win this game 2-1. It's a bit of a stretch, but I can also see a 1-1 draw as well. I just think Sheffield United might just have that edge that they otherwise need. Their depth is lacking, so that could be an issue. And we'll have to see how they come out of this game going forward. But I think they should be able to do something in this game. And I think they could be back to winning ways and get back-to-back wins versus Burnley. After, obviously, their win versus Spurs. Newcastle versus West Ham. Now, West Ham did very well versus Chelsea. But I think Chelsea's inconsistencies kind of helped that. I think Newcastle's defense is much more solidified. I think it's much more stable. I think St. Maximin is an absolute nightmare, and especially since he's known to go from right flank to left flank to right flank. If he just goes down Alonso's side, I don't think Alonso has, like, Alonso's pace is, what is it on FIFA? It must be like 0. Like, he's not very fast at all. Riyad Mahrez showed that. I think Newcastle could potentially win this game. I think they might be defensively sound enough to kind of hold off the likes of Antonio, which he was able to bully, like Rudiger and Christensen. I'm not sure if Newcastle keep a clean sheet. I think it is a good shout. It depends on Lascelles whether he starts. He received some type of cut or something in training, so I'm not sure where that is, you know, in terms of like healing or how bad it is and that sort of thing. I think if Lascelles plays, I think they have a good chance, and I think I'm going to bank on that happening, and I think Newcastle end up nicking this game 1-0. Liverpool versus Aston Villa. I think Liverpool are going to want to redeem themselves. I'm going to go with a 3-0 scoreline. No more to be said about that. I think they're the champions for a reason. They're going to come back and they're going to show why they're the champions after being somewhat embarrassed by Man City. But obviously, with a team like Man City playing that well, you know, nobody should be able to beat them when they play that good. Then we have Southampton versus Man City. I think Southampton have been playing quite well. I think City's defense is obviously a bit ropey, but their attack is absolutely monstrous. And I think that the combination between Kevin De Bruyne and Phil Foden is really starting to show as well. With the directness of Riyad Mahrez, I think Foden's going to see more game time because obviously Sane has officially gone to Bayern Munich and signed for them and won't play for City for the rest of the season. So I think City could win this game. I still think I expect some type of Danny Ings goal or something from Southampton, but I think City will win this game 3-1. And then Spurs versus Everton. I think both teams have merits to, you know, and the quality to potentially win this game. However, I think, you know, some of the Spurs fans are not happy with the style of football that's being played. Jose Mourinho went with probably his most attacking lineup, I would say, in their game versus Sheffield United, which they lost 3-1. So Mourinho is probably going to be like, well, look, this is what happens when I play an attacking lineup. Let me park the bus and play a defensive one. And I think that kind of benefits Everton in this case. I can still see a draw happening. I think that's what I'm going to go with. I think both teams defensively are, like, Spurs is not as good as Everton, but I think both teams are good enough to score. And Kane scored 2 and 2. He has a historical data that shows that he's very good versus Everton. I'm going to sit on the fence with one and go with a scoring draw. And that's it for all of the fixtures. And in terms of our clean sheets and differentials, our clean sheet this week is going to be Brighton. I think that it's a differential pick because they're up against Norwich, and it seems like everyone who plays Norwich just wins. So, and Norwich doesn't score. So I think Brighton is a very good shout. And to pair along with that, we have Matt Ryan in goal, who I'm considering for my free hit team this week. I think he could be really good. I think he could pick up some save points. And if they get the clean sheet, Matt Ryan could be among the bonus if it is a low scoring 1-0 or 2-0 win. Moving on to the defense, I'm actually going with Stevens this week from Sheffield United as like my kind of differential pick. I think he could provide something in the game versus Burnley. I think there is a chance that they could get a clean sheet versus Burnley due to the like injury woes and that sort of stuff. Another defender also you could probably put in here would be Dunk from Brighton as well. And I think they could be good assets. Obviously, Stevens getting his assist, but it seems like when Sheffield United are, you know, in full motion, Stevens seems to be the guy getting forward, you know, making those plays happen, making the runs, and if they're, you know, on point and defensively solid, then I think that Stevens could be in line for a decent haul this week if they keep a clean sheet versus Burnley. Then the midfielder, obviously Mahrez didn't start in the game versus Liverpool, but I think he's more inclined to do so going into Southampton. He's super dangerous when he does start. He has some ridiculous stats for when he does start and go over 60 minutes. Obviously, in his last outing, he scored and got a billion points. And he's only 10% owned, which is still considered a differential in my book. obviously it'd be a lot lower, but I think a lot of people are bringing him in because they saw that he came on, played a few minutes, didn't really get as involved as what he normally would be. But I can definitely see a lineup where Pep he might rest De Bruyne, or maybe he's going into that Southampton game thinking De Bruyne is going to play 60 minutes. Plus, maybe you put in the likes of Rodri and maybe Bernardo Silva in central midfield, and then he starts like Foden or Sterling, and then Riyad Mahrez with like Jesus through the middle. He could also start Sterling in a false line. It's a bunch of different things that can happen. But I'm like, apart from Ederson and De Bruyne starting this coming game week, I think that Mahrez is probably next in line in terms of like FPL assets that are worth it. So I'm going to bank on him doing well this week. And then lastly, Rashford is not a differential, but I think he's almost mandatory this week. He is going to be so hungry to score, and when he does score, he may go ballistic, and I think you cannot risk not having him this week. If you don't have at least 2 attacking Manchester United assets, you probably should have 3 if you don't have Rashford, or at least Manchester United as a clean sheet option in Wan-Bissaka or Maguire as well. In my original team, I currently have Bruno Fernandes, Aaron Wan-Bissaka, and do I have Rashford on my original team? I can't even remember, to be honest. But I think no, I don't. I have Pogba. That's who it is. How could I forget? But yeah, I think Rashford and Martial could do very well this week. I think Bruno can obviously still do well this week. I think there's a chance that Mason Greenwood and the likes of Luke Shaw could get rotated, because Solskjaer was saying that, like, some people have knocks, here and there, but there could be some slight rotation. I think Shaw is a direct replacement, to come off for Brandon Williams. And I think the likes of Daniel James with his just kind of direct driving at the back line could be a differential pick in terms of if he does start, he could be quite good versus Bournemouth. Because basically St. Maximin just kind of ran at the defense, crossed the ball across into the 18-yard box, and Newcastle put 4 in the goal, basically. And that's kind of what happened. Obviously him getting 3 assists for that. So yeah, that looks pretty good there. Let's move on to our current free hit team. So this is what our free hit team currently looks like. So for originating from our previous team, we have Wan-Bissaka, who's still in the team currently, and that's mainly just because we wanted to keep him for price rises because it looked like he was going up. We have Trent Alexander-Arnold. We still have the likes of Bruno Fernandes, and then everyone else is pretty much new. Lascelles, I think we've kept from our team. Obviously, he's got the yellow flag over him as well. But basically, we brought in the players that if they were to go up in price, we would have them in the team. So, like Phil Foden, Christian Pulisic, Wan-Bissaka. If Kevin De Bruyne or Mahrez or Kane went up, those were people. People were bringing them in. Rashford, same as well. We wanted to have them in just in case they did rise. Same for Mason Holgate. He looks a good cheaper option. Obviously not great as a fixture, but could be someone that we just kind of have off the bench. Kane I just have in here just because I don't know why, but the likes of Salah would only go down if anything, so we kind of took him out just for the time being. I don't see him not coming back into the team, especially with Klopp's word after his press conference today. He was just saying during it that they're not Christmas presents for FPL starts, so it makes sense that he's probably gonna play him for sure. So in terms of transfers, let's see what we are gonna do. So we currently have 5.2 million in the bank, which is a lot because we've obviously gotten rid of a midfielder for Salah. So there's a couple of teams that I was kind of thinking at the moment. So I think that the double Brighton goalkeeper, so it doesn't matter which one plays, we obviously get obviously Ryan's probably going to start, and Button's a 3.9 goalkeeper, so it kind of works out. I think Ryan or Ederson this week will be the goalkeeper. So we'll just go with the team currently as is. We'll say our starting defense is, if I wanted to go triple Man United, obviously we wouldn't have Wan-Bissaka in there. We definitely won't have Kane because Kane's obviously not great. We would need, if we wanted Martial, we could have him If we wanted to play 2 up front and thought Mason Green was going to start, we could potentially use him. But I think probably the most likely, situation is I don't think Foden's going to start this week, but he looks so good. So there's all chance that he definitely could, and at 5.2 he's just so cheap. But I'm just going to show you what kind of teams I'm kind of running through my head. So we'll just restore him. I'll leave Holgate in there. We'll just get rid of the souls for the time being. Who else would stay? They would stay. Okay. So we would just bring in Nketiah just because he's cheap and he's just going to go on the bench and probably see some minutes. We would bring in Martial. Put him in the midfield. We would have the likes of Ederson in goal. And then down back, it gets a bit interesting. I kind of played around with the prospect that Van Dijk is most likely going to play pretty much every game for the most part for Liverpool. I also consider triple Liverpool defense too, which is something that's a bit weird. But if Martial, the problem here is that there's not enough midfielder spots. So I like De Bruyne, I like Mahrez, I like Martial, I like Pulisic, I like Fernandes, I like Foden, I like Salah, I like Mane this week as well. Salah more than Mane. I like David Silva. I like Bernardo Silva to potentially start as well. And they're all midfielders, and obviously can't fit them all. Now, Pulisic could make way, obviously, for the likes of Salah. And we would put him in there. And then we would have a 5 million defender, kind of what we're working with, who's going to have to be somebody that kind of starts. So if I was hedging my bets here, I could potentially go with like a cheaper defender. So if we just go look at the defenders here, I could go with the Sheffield United defender versus Burnley. I could also go with a Burnley defender. I could easily put Wan-Bissaka, back in and replace Martial with Pulisic as an example, to be a bit more balanced. But I like the 3 United attack this week. Digne really intrigues me this week. They're against Spurs, so it is kind of bad, but I think he could be really intriguing. Dunk is another option, obviously, versus Norwich. Could be quite nice. We could also upgrade, our non-playing defender to potentially something that might, a player that might play. Could be an interesting shout in that regard. And it's a pretty solid team. So the team that we would basically play is we would play Ederson, then we would play our 3 down the back in Van Dijk, Trent, Dunk. We play 3 across midfield, all our midfielders, and then we play Rashford and Connolly up top. And then we'd have first sub would be Nketiah, then Holgate, then Navarro, then obviously Button would be our backup goalkeeper. And I think that could be a solid free hit team for this week. However, is City potentially going to keep a clean sheet versus Southampton? Well, I mean, if they kept a clean sheet versus the current Premier League champions for this season, then they could probably keep a clean sheet against anyone. So I think it's not a bad shout. I think De Bruyne and Ederson are kind of the most nailed on players for City. And I say that very loosely because I think Ederson is really the only most nailed on player. But if I were to take... The problem is if I take a gamble on Phil Foden, he is very cheap. And he takes up a midfield spot. And he did play, I believe it was all 90 minutes, I want to say. I don't think he got subbed off versus Liverpool. And he could be benched versus Southampton, which would be very unfortunate. I think Mara is obviously coming on somewhat early-ish on in the game. Shows that he's probably going to start the next game. David Silva not playing at all could be an interesting option. So let's kind of play around with that idea. So I think Fernandes is obviously very good. If I were to go with the likes of David Silva, so if we go to Silva, all players, David Silva. could be an interesting prospect. We would have to get rid of Ederson, obviously. We would bring in the likes of Ryan, because he is the main goalkeeper for Brighton. We don't have to worry about, too many Brighton players. We can obviously play any goalkeeper here. I'll just go with Martin. He can easily just go in there. The likelihood of obviously him not playing is not going to be, he's going to start basically. Then we can look for other options here. So if we definitely wanted to play, if we thought like Mason Greenwood was going to start, we could bring in Greenwood for 4.4 on the free hit and kind of just go with that. That is an option. Or if we get Nketiah back, but we go for like a 4-5-1 maybe, or we just have Dunk maybe on the bench just in case, and we just take out the likes of Navarro and we bring in Wan-Bissaka back into the team, and then we can run, if we think the defense is going to hold out versus Norwich, or we think Connolly is likely to start. Maybe we get early team news that Connolly is starting. That also helps as well. Or the defense, because we know Dunk and Ryan are going to start. It's just, is Connolly going to start would be my kind of, worry here. And then you just have a more balanced side there. I'm just trying to think of other potential options. I'm starting to be blinded kind of by how like nailed on obviously Ederson is, but he's not going to make any saves, so he's literally just there for the clean sheet. And is City going to keep the clean? I mean, they kept the clean sheet versus Liverpool. Surely they're going to keep the clean sheet. There's no way that they won't, right? Right. And then in terms of other defenders, obviously Dunk could be upgraded to Digne if we felt that Spurs aren't going to be as good. So that could be an option. Another thing that we can also play around with the idea of is we restore Foden. We play Kane. And then we basically we wouldn't get Trent. We would get like Van Dijk as an example would be our defender. We go for the likes of Dunk, and then we would play two up top, 5 in midfield, and 3 down the back, and we would just look to have just playing defenders on the bench. So we would have who's a good 4.4. We would just have Lascelles, and if he plays, he plays. If he doesn't, he doesn't. And we would basically start Ryan, Wan-Bissaka, Van Dijk, Dunk, 5 across midfield, and then Kane and Rashford. But I don't think Spurs are very good, so I don't think that's an option. Another team to potentially look at as well is Gabriel Jesus. So it'd be Foden out, Kane out. But Jesus getting hooked pre-60 minutes is kind of making me very wary of this. So potentially in we would obviously bring Trent back in. We would keep Dunk. We could bring in the likes of like Saint Maximin to play across in midfield, and then we could like downgrade Lascelles to just like Navarro or somebody like that to just make up the cash there. And then our team would be Ryan, Wan-Bissaka, Trent, Dunk, 5 in midfield, and then our 2 up top. Problem is, I don't like the only forwards that I really like is Rashford, Greenwood if he starts, but could be rotated. Kane historically, but I don't think he's very good. I don't like Jesus. I like Connolly this week if he starts. I like Malpai this week if he starts. If we go through all the other teams, so Liverpool, Firmino, no. Martial's obviously a midfielder. I don't like either Abraham or Giroud this week. I don't like... Who else? Like Newcastle, I don't particularly like. I think the only ones I'm really kind of considering is like Connolly, Greenwood, Rashford, Malpai are like the 4 main ones. I think Rashford's almost a must-have forward line because otherwise you just have too much money basically, especially if you don't have a Liverpool asset. So it's a bit, it's a bit kind of weird. I think what I'm going to do is just kind of show basically players that are either going to be in my team. So I'm going to get rid of Martin and I'm going to put in Ederson here. It's going to say I have too many Man City players, but that's fine. And then in terms of other players there, we have, just have to turn the music back on there. We have, obviously the likes of Phil Foden could be an option. I don't like Jesus, obviously. It's just a matter if I think Greenwood's going to start or not. So Ryan or Ederson are probably going to be one of my goalkeepers. If I go with Ederson, that means I'm going to have just Mars and De Bruyne. If I go with Ryan, I can have Foden, I can have David Silva, I can have another City player, or even a City defender. I think I'm going to have one of Trent or Van Dijk. I think Wan-Bissaka could make way. But if I have triple City midfield, he's definitely staying. I think Connolly is going to probably stay in the team the whole time because it just only makes the most sense because he's just so cheap. Especially if he does... start, it could be very good for him. And yeah, so I think probably the structure of this team, I think I'm gonna, so definites in the team, either Ryan or Ederson, triple Man United with 2 of those being Fernandes and Rashford, and the third one either being Wan-Bissaka or Martial. Double Liverpool with Trent and Salah or Salah and Van Dijk. 2 City in De Bruyne and Mahrez with Ederson, or De Bruyne and Mahrez with Foden or David Silva. Connolly, definitely just because he's a cheap option. Dunk is probably going to be in there somewhere as either our third defender or just somebody who could just come off the bench potentially, but most likely our third defender. And then everything else is kind of up for grabs. I kind of need to hear Pep's press conference to kind of finalize some things, but otherwise than that, I think the team pretty much picks itself. It just obviously stems on which goalkeeper we want to go with, and if we want to go with triple City midfield. Because if we go with triple City midfield, that kind of rules out Martial if I want to keep Fernandes and Salah. If we go with double City midfield and Ederson, then it kind of rules out Foden as an example, because that 5th slot in midfield will go to Martial, which means it would rule out Wan-Bissaka, which means we probably go with double Liverpool defense with like Van Dijk down the back, because I don't think there's any other teams defensively that I'd probably go for. So Liverpool obviously is a good fixture. City could keep a clean sheet. Chelsea I don't trust. Wolves, I still think they're probably going to concede. United, obviously. The rest of them, maybe Newcastle, but the rest of them, apart from Brighton versus Norwich, United versus Bournemouth, Liverpool versus Villa, and City versus Southampton, those are the only 4 really that I think could be clean sheet worthy to bring in. I think Burnley will probably end up nicking one versus Sheffield United, unfortunately, but yeah. So I think that is going to do it for today's stream. I think that's going to do it for today's stream. So yeah, make sure to follow us here on Twitch. We do this for every game week preview. Pilot Flame 226. Also give us a follow over on Twitter. It's the same, Pilot Flame 226 as well. That's where we post when we go live. It also is just kind of updates for the channel when videos go out. Those sorts of things kind of over on Twitter. And then obviously YouTube, Pilot Flame 226 as well. We have the socials, which I'm gonna put in the chat just now. We have our own custom link now, thanks to you. After we went over 100 subscribers on YouTube, it's fantastic, and hopefully once we get to 1,000, I'll be able to make that the permanent link rather than the old username which I used to use back when I played a lot of different games and whatnot, and that's why it's not Pilot Flame 226, unfortunately. I may look to see if I can get the uppercase version for Twitch. I'll have to kind of check that out, but we'll kind of play around with it. Because it kind of looks a bit weird with Twitter being the capitals, YouTube being the capitals, and Twitch not being the capitals. So, but again, you find Pilot Flame 226 everywhere, and you'll come up with my channels. Yeah, so we posted a few YouTube videos as well. Make sure to check those out over on the YouTube channel as well. And yeah, give us a like, give us a subscribe over there. A lot of people are subscribing to the channel in the past few weeks, which is fantastic to see. Hopefully we can get more, build our own little FPL community that we have going on here. So yeah, that's going to do it for this game week. And I will post my lineup later this evening once I have team news or like any type of inclination from a press conference from Pep, if he does it today. And we'll post the team, and on the video give the explanation as to why we went with those decisions. So yeah, that's going to do it. Hope you enjoyed it. I know the stream was a bit ropey earlier, and I know there's been a bit of issues, but I think we managed to go through it as well. So thanks for watching, and we will see you in the next one. Take care.